Welcome to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires, the show where we talk about finding strength when life falls apart. I'm your host, Melly, and around here, resilience isn't perfection. It's falling flat, getting back up, and maybe laughing about it later. From breakups to breakthroughs, we mix faith, neuroscience, and a little sass to help you rebuild a life that actually feels like yours. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome back to another episode of Diamonds in Dumpster Fires. Today we have a very special guest with us, Margarita Kogan, who helps women who look like they have it all together but feel anything but. She is a licensed therapist and the creator of Honor and Heal, a healing space for women unraveling the deep patterns of emotional trauma, toxic relationships, and self-betrayal. With a background in clinical therapy and lived experience, she brings a direct, grounded, and refreshingly honest approach to transformation. If you've ever felt stuck repeating the same emotional cycles, this is the conversation that might change everything. Margarita, welcome to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires.
Melly, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, and this is an important one, talking about breaking toxic cycles. And I'd love to start by defining the landscape. Toxic cycles can show up in so many ways with relationships, thought patterns, or habits. How can someone identify the difference between when they're just maybe in what might be a hard season and when they're actually in a toxic pattern or cycle?
Well, that's such a great question. So, a toxic cycle or pattern really comes down to if you're finding yourself in situations consistently that negatively impact your life, whether it's the quality of your life, your ability to earn, the people around you impacting decisions, and those individuals are impacting how you're showing up for yourself. That would be toxic if you keep going back to situations like that. And even if you leave a relationship or a work environment, but find yourself in a new one, and all of the sudden the conversation is similar to, oh my goodness, this is, not the place I want to be. These are not the people I want to be with. But you consistently find yourself in those situations. That's more toxic if you keep going back to that and it's not changing. However, a period or a phase of life is more of sitting with the hard stuff. Life throws all sorts of things at us, and being able to sit with those things and reflect on, I'm not comfortable here. What do I want this to look like? Is a very different approach than seeking out consciously or subconsciously situations where it's constantly chaotic or toxic.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And why is it, do you think, that so many of us stay in cycles that we know are unhealthy?
Yeah, so when it comes to women, smart, capable women stay stuck not because they're like weak or they're unaware, but we were actually conditioned to survive through self abandonment.
Interesting. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So when we're kids growing up, right, we are very egocentric and we do things in order for survival. And we also believe that anything we do impacts everything around us. When we're taught that love or safety really means suppressing what you need, your nervous system starts to learn that caretaking equals security, right? And the caretaking comes through as for children of, oh, mom didn't like my reaction to that, or dad didn't like my reaction to that. So I'm not going to do that anymore. And even things like crying or asking for an extra cup of juice or extra food, little things like that really start to add up. So when we get older, when we see the red flags, part of us starts saying, you need to earn the belonging. And the only way you've known how to do that is abandon what you're really wanting and kind of bite your tongue a little bit. Does that make sense?
That does. That's really interesting. Yeah, so you're saying basically that people who are in toxic patterns as adults, this may have happened as they were children growing up. We may have learned ways to get love or get affection that might have set us up for these toxic situations.
I think 100%. So a lot of people talk about trauma, right? And we really expect trauma to be something big or impactful. A lot of folks don't realize that childhood trauma isn't always dramatic. It can be very small moments that teach our nervous system that love is really unpredictable. And without comfort, you start to learn that people who are supposed to be here might disappear. And then that becomes our template for future relationships and environments that we seek out. We might not even be conscious of it.
That's really interesting. And does this only have to do with family of origin, or could this be something that's learned like in elementary school or junior high, kind of relationships with friends and those types of things?
Definitely. And that's so interesting because we spend so much time in school, in our environment with our peers. I think that has a huge impact on us experiencing those types of environments. I think teachers definitely can impact that, right? Teachers, coaches, etc. A lot of women come with origin stories of friendships where they felt ostracized or they felt like they were not good enough. There was always somebody at the top of the group that would consistently cut the other girls down in the group, and girls learn to always make sure to show up better or brighter or do other things to keep that attention and keep that belonging. So I think not only family of origin, but absolutely your environment with friends is super important, and school as well. I think that that is one of the biggest pieces that people underestimate the impact of, and that is your surroundings when you're growing up.
I have talked to several women who have gone through divorce, or they might be in the middle of a divorce now. And, they're starting to recognize these toxic patterns. Maybe they were married for 10, 12, 15 years. And they're like, I can see actually year one, year two, there were these toxic patterns that I didn't recognize. Is that something that can suddenly develop besides from this, your surroundings growing up, that somebody who may have not had any of that kind of trauma in their childhood suddenly finding themselves stuck in that cycle? Or is it more that they probably did have that trauma and just aren't recognizing it?
So, if somebody's saying that there were patterns that came through after year one or two that they did not recognize initially, that can come from a lot of things. And I think one of the main components of that is that women's intelligence, when we are groomed or when we are taught to really self abandon, our intelligence goes into managing our pain, not identifying it. So, for the first 2 years of a relationship or a marriage, women very frequently will say, that's okay. I'll mitigate this situation. Or, you know what, my partner's having a hard day, so I will figure out how to make it better. By year 3 or 4, you get really tired. And then by 5, 6, and 7, that's not really weight that you can carry as much as at the beginning when things were fun and exciting, because life gets in the way, right? And if you're carrying the weight of the relationship, of the other person who probably already had these behaviors, but instead not you, but women in general, kind of brushed it under the rug, then it just gets too exhausting. And all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, what is going on here?
I've definitely heard that from several people that I've talked to, that it sort of seems to sneak up on them. They're like, something happened, but yet when they look back, they can kind of see the beginnings of that, like you said, in the year one and two, where maybe they're just managing the pain, thinking this is a rough patch for my partner. We'll get through it. And then, yeah, like you said, those 5, 6, 7 years, it's like the weight becomes pretty unmanageable at that point. What do you suggest for someone who might be listening to this and maybe they are in that year 5, 6, 7, and they're starting to recognize this is what's going on and they're not sure if they are ready to get out of a relationship or even if they want to do that? Are there things that can be done at that stage to fix a toxic situation?
Well, I think that depends really depending on the amount of toxicity, right? If we're talking about, oh, you're married to a narcissistic partner or there's any type of abuse, those types of situations are really ones you want to reflect on and make a decision for yourself of what you want to do with that. Now, if you're noticing toxic patterns of, the partner not really helping in the home, I was actually listening to some of your episodes and you guys were talking about really being a single person in a relationship. And so if you're in situations like that, having conversations, the really uncomfortable ones where you express what's going on for you. So you don't want to blame shift, but really sharing with the person what is happening for you. What is your experience of it? Because very frequently, men actually have zero idea that their partner is not happy. So women get very resentful and they become very upset. The men don't understand why the women are upset. And so there's a lack of communication. So I think a really good place to start with is honoring what you actually want, looking at the situation and pinpointing, you know what, this is what I'm not happy with. And going a little bit deeper of why are you not happy with this? What are your beliefs around that? A lot of things that come up is about keeping a house tidy, etc. So for many women, it's very important that their house is tidy and organized, etc. Some men may not be as committed to that, but have no idea that it's really that distressing. And I think where women abandon themselves is they just bite their tongue. Instead of saying something, they're like, I'm too much. It's fine. I'll just deal with it. So I think a good starting place is really acknowledging, what are you not happy with? What is not working? What are you seeing that the toxic pattern is? Because part of that is the woman that's inside of it.
Now, for the woman who perhaps is already divorced, maybe she's been divorced for, a year or two more, but she finds herself on the dating apps out there in the world and picking partners that are possibly headed towards these same kind of toxic patterns. What would you say to her as far as how do you get out of that? How do you choose somebody who's not going to trigger these toxic patterns?
Yeah, so this one, it's funny, right? The apps will bring about all of the people. And I think as you're dating, right, after marriage, that's one of the things that I went through right after my divorce is you hop on the apps or you start going on dates and it's fun and exciting until it's really not. And you have
Yeah,
to,
it's really not.
right? There's a thing of, the people that pop up in your life are mirrors for you. I feel like a lot of folks dive in, and I was 100% one of those people where I was like, I'm so good. I'm ready. I'm a therapist. I got this. And sure enough, I was like, whoa, what is happening here? Who are these people? Why are these people showing up in my life? And so, really, it's coming back to yourself and spending time with yourself after the dates, after the conversations, and identifying, okay, this didn't sit well with me. I think we miss a lot of red flags in the pursuit of getting to our happily ever after. And it's similar to that pattern of the 1 or 2 years being in a relationship of like, oh no, that red flag is okay. Like he said he was going to text, but he didn't. It's okay. He must have been tired. Inevitably, if this keeps happening a couple months down the road, guy's not tired. He has other things going on. But because we brush it aside, we don't acknowledge it. So, really acknowledging for ourselves what is happening, being very, very honest with ourselves, what we are seeing.
Yeah, that is so important because you're right. We do kind of brush it aside. I know personally, I have had many of those situations where I'm like, "Oh yeah, he's busy. He's got all this stuff going on." And you're like, you tell this to a friend and they're like, "Oh, is he just playing you?"
Interesting how people from the side, I think that's one, like, such an interesting point you make because friends will say things, right? They will be like,
Mhm.
I'm not so sure. But when we're in it, we're so committed to proving that no, this is the guy and this is right and it feels good. And we don't spend as much time really critically analyzing, how is this person making me feel? Like when I am, let's say, dinner or a date, or we're texting and having a conversation, am I leaving this conversation feeling safe, feeling seen, feeling heard? Or do I feel like I'm actually having the conversation to keep it going, to get more attention? It's a very different vibe that comes across in those moments. But if we don't take time to reflect, we don't recognize when we're attracting pain, or are we attracting the person that we want in the future?
Yeah, that is such a good point. I know for myself when I have most of the time I would say with people I've met post divorce, they are like, I'm constantly like trying to win them over. And I used to mistake that for like, this is means that, this is worth having because I have to work so hard to get his attention or work so hard to get him to notice me or treat me well that it must be a prize when I get it, as opposed to that's actually quite toxic. Having somebody who reciprocates communication and interest is a totally different ballgame. and not what I was used to. So that is something very interesting, I think, that a lot of folks who have been through divorce probably have to navigate.
Is that, are you saying like the seeking the attention, kind of wanting to prove yourself? Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, it's like you feel almost like if the person is playing hard to get and you have to try so hard to get their attention that like it's worth more if they do say, "Okay, I want to spend time with you," as opposed to the person who just says, "Hey, I like you. Want to spend time with you. Let's get to know each other." When you've been in a toxic situation, the first one, the person you have to work hard for almost feels like you're winning a prize as opposed to like waving a red flag.
Definitely, right? And an interesting, that's such an interesting situation because part of it is the person who's probably available and slow and steady after a toxic relationship, it doesn't feel right. There's no excitement, and you're missing that dopamine hit that you get with somebody who is, let's say, avoidant or unavailable, because then you've won the prize, or it feels like you've won the prize. But also, when everything explodes and doesn't go the way you would dream of, you also get that kind of crisis mode. And it creates this toxic cycle, right? It's almost like an abuse cycle where your brain is seeking out the dopamine. So you keep attracting these relationships because your nervous system is recognizing it as home.
Right. Yeah, and that is something that's really hard to kind of break. And I know on your website you talk about the idea of healing as coming home to yourself, and I really loved that image. Can you share what that means? What does coming home to yourself really look like?
Yeah, so the whole concept of coming home to yourself really came for me when, post divorce, etc. I was trying to figure out, okay, well, I know all of this stuff, right? I'm a therapist, I work with women, I work with couples. Like, how am I seeking out these patterns? What I noticed in that moment is that I was constantly trying to fix myself, make myself better, make myself quote unquote better in relationships. And I think the core thing that came to me is that none of us are broken, right? We are just buried deep under layers of believing that we need to fix things and change things. And that really, the healing is about remembering the parts of you that learn to survive and meeting them with compassion. So whether it's going back to the childhood or going back to the toxic relationship you may have been in, really remembering what are the moments where you sat back and you were like, oh, this doesn't feel good, I'm going to push through. Or even in hindsight, looking back and saying, I cannot even believe I was dealing with this, or I cannot believe I was in that situation. And sitting with yourself and giving yourself compassion for making the choices that you made in that moment, and then choosing to something different. But only comes through awareness of past situations.
Okay, that makes sense. And so, how can listeners, if they're in this place where they're like, okay, I'm aware that I was involved in these toxic relationships, toxic patterns, I know I don't want that for my future. How do they start to kind of get in touch with what home actually looks like for them?
Yeah, so that's like the core, right? When I created my program, that was the core of Honor and Heal, is really figuring this out. So guiding women back to the parts that they abandoned leads from really self-trust. And the self-trust starts in little moments throughout the day. It's interesting, a lot of women, and I don't know the depth of your situation or some of the other women listening, but there are a lot of women who lose themselves to the point of not knowing which choices to make. And so they'll turn to a friend, right? If you're going out on a date, it's like, what do I wear? I don't know what to wear. Can you help me? Or I don't know what to eat. Can you help me choose, right, on a date, etc. So it's
Mhm.
really learning to trust yourself in little moments day to day and feeling okay with that choice. But it's really starting with the little choices.
Interesting. Okay. And so, in doing that and making little small choices and seeing the outcomes of those, is that the way that someone can begin to then rebuild trust in their own voice and decision making?
That is a good place to start in rebuilding. How do I trust myself to make choices for myself? A lot of women who come through difficult relationships don't know that they can trust themselves because they've either been gaslit or told that their ideas or their voice was not important. And so they start to lose it. But in acknowledging yourself, and even if you make a decision that doesn't necessarily work out for you, finding, okay, well, what was the thought process for me when I was making this decision and what part of me is needing that attention. So, yes, making the small decisions is really the step by step process of getting back to trusting yourself and also accepting the decisions that don't necessarily work for you, but knowing that you made the best decision based of from where you were coming.
And for women that are listening and they're trying to understand whether or not they have been involved in these toxic patterns, what are some ways they can recognize the signs? Are there some subtle red flags someone can recognize in their life or their partner's life that might indicate they're repeating an old toxic pattern?
One of the things we talked about earlier about trying to prove yourself, I think that is one of the most important pieces of recognizing a toxic relationship. In particular, if we're talking about dating, but it can also be with friends. If you're feeling that need, right, of I have to text them or I have to prove to them what I said was right, or people are not following up with you, if it doesn't feel like an equal playing field, that really leans frequently towards toxicity because you're constantly trying to prove yourself and you're no longer sitting back and letting things happen in your life. You're forcefully trying to create them. And when that happens, you're no longer listening to your internal guidance of intrinsically what you know is right and what feels right. You are then seeking outside validation. So if you're constantly seeking something and you're feeling unfulfilled or maybe anxious or worried about a situation, or you're trying to strategize and how do I make this relationship work, that can be a huge red flag to pay attention to instead of saying, let me take a break with this and see where the pieces land.
Okay. Yeah, I'm feeling convicted by this as I think about some people in my life even right now that I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I definitely fall into these patterns." But this is really interesting. So, how would somebody then, let's say, okay, I've recognized this. We'll just use me as the example. I use myself as an example quite a bit for listeners, so they're used to it. But what do you do next? Like you're in this situation, somebody, you're constantly, striving, auditioning for them, trying to get them to write you back, struggling to make sense of what they're saying. It's just confusing as heck. And so now where do you go from there?
Well, that sounds really intense. Like if you're confused and you're not sure what somebody's saying, that's a situation where you definitely want to fall back a lot and gain some clarity for yourself. So for when I work with women, right, one of the biggest things we work on is okay, let's go inside. Let's go inside and what parts of you are showing up saying, yes, pursue this, as opposed to, oh, this feels scary. And what we want to do is really separate the thoughts. A great way to figure this out is do kind of like a mental mind map or a brain dump of the situation. So if you are speaking with somebody or having some kind of relationship with a friend or a partner, and you're not really sure how it's feeling, if you take a blank piece of paper and you write down anything that comes to mind when you think about that person, your brain will spit out all of the information you need. The caveat to that is when you see this information that you've written on this blank piece of paper about the situation that you're in, it's accepting it. I think as human beings, we are really, really good at lying to ourselves because it's a
Yeah.
defense mechanism. It's a survival thing, right? It's if I make it good enough, it's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. But if we stop lying to ourselves and we sit back and we do a body scan or a couple of deep breaths and say, this doesn't really feel good. This doesn't feel safe. I don't feel confident in this. That gives us a lot of answers. But again, the piece of that is acknowledging it and accepting it for yourself instead of then pursuing it again. And that's the toxic part is when you see all of these red flags or you see all of these challenges that are coming up, but you still go back and you say, you know what, maybe tomorrow's a better day, or we're going to try again. A different approach maybe.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Now, in looking at that, I feel like there could be people that will take this and then maybe take it too far, if that's even the right term. Whereas now they, instead of just allowing these kinds of things to protect themselves and allowing their intuition to guide them, they might overdo and just push everyone away and be like, nope, one little thing, somebody says something that maybe could be taken one way or the other, but we take it the negative way and we're like, nope, shut it down. It's a red flag. How do you tell the difference between like your reactions being just, part of your healing process and actually knowing what is, your intuition?
Well, boundaries are gold. So, what you're talking about, right, is really boundaries. And the magic thing about boundaries is they have to be flexible within certain parameters. So, you have to know your hard nose. And then you also have to know with things that are okay-ish, right? So if somebody, and it's part of the healing path of when you come from a place where your boundaries were violated so much that you no longer know where to trust yourself, etc. Most people swing the opposite end of like, I want nothing to do with any of this. Like if somebody tells a white lie and I catch them in it, that's it, we're going to write them off. Or if, somebody says they're going to call me back and they forget, but they follow up with a text, I'm going to cut them off. And I think the magic in that is really, okay, communicating it to the other person first and seeing their response. And how does that response land with you, right? And knowing what your hard no's are. For example, like if somebody's going on a date and the person no shows, that should be probably like a hard no. But if somebody, yes, but if somebody like doesn't call and texts you and follows up and says, hey, I'm sorry, and it doesn't happen again, it's not a consistent pattern, perhaps that's something the individual can work on in saying, I need to be a little more flexible because human beings are still human. We're not robots. We're not all trained to perform exactly at the time that we are needed. And so giving grace to other people, but also making sure that you feel safe in that moment.
Now, when it comes to integrating these things in and we're, doing the work, trying to, find ways to get past these toxic patterns, what are some signs that someone can point to and say, okay, yes, I am healing. I'm no longer going in these toxic circles?
I think that really depends on where people start, but a big marker is when certain things that really activate someone or trigger someone no longer impact how they are making their decision. So when women are really raw in that healing journey and they see something and have a strong reaction to it, that typically indicates that there's something else going on. And so being aware of, oof, I'm having a strong reaction to this, and journaling about it and keeping track of what's going on for you in that moment, to maybe following that down a path of this is no longer really impacting me. So people can, for example, not text me back and then I don't have a strong reaction to it. I don't feel abandoned. I don't feel upset that they didn't show up. It's more of like, that person didn't text me back. Okay, we're going to move them to this category, right? They're not somebody that I'm pursuing anymore. But it changes how the severity of your reaction will change to certain triggers, as well as the follow up process. You no longer pursue those situations of, let's say somebody didn't text you, so you're texting them back like 3, 4 times. Are you okay? Did I miss something? You kind of just let it be. And you come back to yourself and you sit with yourself and you see what happens around you so that you know where to go.
Okay. And what would you suggest for someone to help them kind of stay grounded when those old triggers resurface? Because I'm sure for a lot of us, maybe like the text message example is a great one. We might, when we first got divorced, feel really triggered when somebody doesn't write us back right away and send paragraph after paragraph and really regret doing that. But then we get to a point where we're not doing that anymore. But then someone doesn't text back and you feel that like anxious, like it hasn't happened maybe even in months, but all of a sudden you kind of feel that anxiety building up, that like butterflies in the stomach. And how do you stop that from taking over and restarting that pattern?
Yeah, so I think there will definitely be triggers, and those come in waves, right? Healing is not linear. And I think a lot of us expect it to be very linear of like, you know what, I went through therapy, I did the work, and here I am healed. And all of a sudden you meet somebody and inevitably something will happen. And folks are like, whoa, this is out of left field. Like, what is going on? So you said an interesting a little tidbit where we want to get through it. And the magic really is not necessarily getting through something, not necessarily pushing it away. It's really sitting with it. When you have that sense of, oh my gosh, I want to text this person and I'm panicking and the butterflies in your stomach, first of all, open a notes app and write down everything you want to write, because your brain does not know the difference between I text this person or I wrote it in a note. Get it out, and let that energy move through you. Let the thoughts move through you, and then sit with it. And when I say sit with it, a really important skill set is seeing somatically, right, in your body, what is happening. So you mentioned the butterflies, right?
Mhm.
What we want to do is find those butterflies. And how are they moving in our body? Do they feel tight? Are they making you want to run? What are they doing for you? And follow that through your body. It's a huge thing in terms of healing trauma, is how are things happening in your body? Because your body and your nervous system will override your brain. It will hijack your actions if you don't give it space and time to heal. And so letting that move through and feeling that angst, right? It's probably anxiety that comes up, and then it's that moments of, oh, this person doesn't like me. And then we get to the self-abandoning abandonment feelings of like, I'm not worth it. And if you sit with all of those, all of these emotions will move through your body and then they will dissipate. So we really fall into this like, let's move through it and let's get this over with. The biggest thing is not to rush to rebuild or not to rush to kind of fix the situation. Grieve what's coming up for you, feel what's coming up for you, and then you can take the ugly parts and the pretty parts and go forward and make choices based off of that.
I think for a lot of us, we just don't do that. We don't wait. We feel the trigger, we react. So you're saying sit with it, feel it, say, I feel it in my stomach. It's my throat feels tight, kind of really recognizing where it is in the body and then letting that be.
Yes. So once you recognize where it is in your body, it's really actually challenging to not react. And that is a very important skill set of, okay, when I feel like this, when I feel the tightness or I feel the adrenaline, make it a hard and fast rule to not respond or react on that. If you have to say something, call a friend. Use an AI app to dump all your stuff into it. Use your notes app to dump all of your stuff in it. But don't act in an interrelational situation on those feelings. The job there is to feel what's going on in your body, sit with it, and contain it for yourself. And then after it passes, because feelings are not facts, they pass. I think a lot of us get scared of, oh, if I feel grief or sadness, it will never go away. A lot of women say, I'm scared to cry because I feel if I start crying, I'm never going to stop. But eventually the tears stop, the grief passes, and then you come out on the other side a very different person. So, yes, sitting with it for, let's say, 5 minutes. Give yourself 5 to 10 minutes to breathe, to sit with it, and then move forward and figure out what you want to do after the feelings have passed.
If you had to boil this down to one truth that you wanted listeners to hold on to as they begin their process of rebuilding trust in themselves and moving forward, what would you pick?
I think that the biggest thing is when everything's falling apart, accept what's real, even the ugly parts. When people accept the ugly parts of what's going on and everything is kind of burned down, then you get to actually feel the power in rebuilding it. When things burn down, it's a wonderful opportunity to start rebuilding something new and gaining clarity on what you want in your future. You can build it on that empty canvas that happens after everything gets burned down. So if you don't recognize yourself right now, that's okay. You're not lost. You're just becoming someone that you've never met before. And now's the perfect opportunity to start meeting who you want to be and who you intrinsically are. So meet yourself kind of in the middle of the mess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, like you said, you might not know the person that you're becoming. And so you get to meet her and get to know who that person is. I love that idea as opposed to just thinking of it as like we said earlier, it's not just getting through something, you're actually becoming something new.
Definitely. And you're getting the opportunity to kind of meet yourself as well. So we were all born with a certain set of criteria, the way we were created. We're all different intrinsically. And I believe there's a reason for that, right? I believe there's a reason why people are not all the same. And I think our gifts really lie in that taking time to allow ourselves to become who we are meant to be instead of following the program that we were taught or fitting into these relationships that are not necessarily supporting us or really working for us. But that's the turning points where the women I work with realize that there's so much more their life can offer them if they are authentic and true to themselves.
Definitely. I love that. And speaking of the women that you work with, how can listeners connect with you, work with you, learn more about your approach to healing?
Absolutely. So the easiest way is to find me on Instagram, and that's back to self healing. All of my programs and offerings are on there, and as well on my site, back to self healing. So that would be the easiest and best way to find me and any new cohorts that are opening up.
Amazing. Thank you. And we will have a link to her Instagram in the show notes for those of you listening along. Now, as we close this out today, I'd love to know, is there some kind of affirmation or saying, quote, something that you personally return to when you want to anchor back into your self-trust?
That's interesting. I think for me and a lot of women, the affirmation is really what is true for me. So when I don't know what to do or what to say or, how things are folding out, a lot of times we will fall back on, what do other people think or how is this going to look? But if we take a moment to ask ourselves, what is true for me? That is the only thing that matters because this is your life and your journey. And if you reflect on what you intrinsically feel and know, then everything will be shaped around that truth for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Margarita. I'm sure listeners are going to get so much out of this episode. I really appreciate you taking time today to speak with me.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure.
And listeners, please go to the show notes. We will have links to Margarita's Instagram, her website. Please check those out. And if this episode helped you today, could you please share this with a friend? Thank you so much for being here today, folks. And until next time, be well. Thanks for listening to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires. If today reminded you that resilience is a practice, not a personality trait, you're in the right place. Keep showing up, keep rebuilding, and don't forget, even diamonds start as pressure and mess. For more faith-filled encouragement and real-life tools to help you heal and grow, check out the show notes for some free resources and ways to stay connected. See you next time.